All right, YouTube, it's Clear Vision Wednesday time. I am super excited to be here like every Wednesday. My name is Claudia Muehlenweg. I'm the founder of the Natural Clear Vision Institute, and every week we go live here to answer all your questions about any vision-related problems and or maybe teach you something that you might not even had a question about. So today is one of those topics where I didn't even know that was a thing until recently. So I'm very excited to bring on my guest. But before I bring her on, make sure you subscribe. You click the little bell icon. That really helps me to create better and better content because it is an investment of my time and my team's time. So we want to serve you and give you really good stuff completely for free. All right. Let me bring on my guest, Dr. Brandy Cummings. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brandy.
Hey, Claudia, good to be here.
So we're going to talk about something where I'm like, let's not spill the beans. And then I realized our thumbnail said it big and far. So mold, right? Mold is a thing that usually eye doctors don't ask you about. Nobody
Yeah.
really talks about mold. And I have to be honest, I didn't really even know that was a thing. So tell us, why are you so interested in mold and what it does to our eyes and our health in general?
So about 10 years ago, I was completely healthy, never saw a doctor, and I started work at this new place, and all of a sudden everything in my life changed. I had a huge amount of vision issues. I was dizzy all the time. I didn't feel present in my body, and I couldn't. And as the time went on, I just got worse and worse and worse. My mental health suffered, and I was like, what in the world is happening? No doctor could figure it out. They thought I had MS, they thought I had Meniere's. I just went from just the whole gamut of tests. Nobody could figure it out. They just told me it was in my head. I couldn't maintain a pregnancy. It was the most low time in my life. Finally, I figured out it was mold from this new building that I was working in. And so then it's like once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And I've just been going down that rabbit hole ever since.
And I know you have two children now. You're a homeschooling mom, which is like to me, it's amazing that you do. I don't think I could have done that, but that's great. So you obviously fixed that problem because now you have two beautiful children.
Yeah.
But mold is one of those things where, and I told you before we went live really quick. So in my life, I remember my very first apartment back in the day in Germany. It was one of those subsidized housing things. I was a student, and I had black mold on the wall. And all we did, we sprayed it with bleach. And then many years later, I had already been in the US for a while, and I moved into a really beautiful old craftsman house that we rented near my younger daughter's high school. It was just, it didn't want to buy something in that expensive neighborhood. And I remember, like, after 4 years, I moved out and I pulled the bed away, and that my headrest was on the back to the bathroom wall. So basically, the bathroom
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, and I pulled the bed away, and there was all this black mold underneath. And then lastly, when I first built a back unit and I cleaned out my main house, which is also a 1920 craftsman, and we had crazy rains that year. I live in California, and the basement was flooded, and there was this white, thick mold on there. So that time when I did that, the last time, it was my birthday actually, or the night before my birthday, and I got really sick. But then the next day I was feeling like a little under the weather, and then I was fine. But the first two times, like I didn't really notice anything. And so tell us a little bit because I know some people like you and many other people I talk to have like severe symptoms from mold exposure. So I want to talk about that first. Like, why do some people like me? I mean, it's not like I felt great all the time, but it wasn't like, oh, what's this? What's this dramatic thing? It's like I was at some point in my 40s, you get more tired, you and perimenopause, I was a single mom, working crazy hours, the normal stuff, but nothing where I was like, wait, what is this? Like, I feel really bad all of a sudden. So can you explain that a little bit? And then what the symptoms are?
Yeah, so a lot of it some people are more susceptible from a genetic standpoint. So there's different genes, haplotypes that people can have to make them more susceptible. And so that could be part of that picture. Also, it depends on how their nervous system is. If somebody's experienced a lot of past trauma, or if they're in a very stressful job, or if they're in a not so great relationship, if there's things in their environment that are sending messages of not safety to their cells, then we can have something like a mold exposure kind of be that triggering event, and it just kind of spirals them out. It's like straw that broke the camel's back. And so, if our nervous system is dysregulated, we can be a lot more sensitive. If we have issues with our mast cells and histamine reactions and being more sensitive, then we can be more susceptible to have more undesirable symptoms when it comes to mold exposure.
And so it must be genetic on my case because I was definitely, well, as a student, I don't remember. I went to art school but I remember when I was in the South, I was a single mom of a teenager and
Yeah.
I dealt with a lot of crap. I know I was not in a relaxed state, but not as bad as it was before. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking for me, it must be genetics combined with like not in the worst time of my life in terms of stress.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit like before we get even into the symptoms, what are the different types of mold? Because I talked about seeing that black mold, which we know is bad. But then also when I cleaned out that basement that was flooded, there was like that much water in it, and there was
Yeah.
shelves in there with like boxes, plastic boxes, right? So the mold loved like having that time, like it was really growing like a thick white beard. It was like on the wall. So tell us a little bit about the different types of mold. Is it also stuff that we see? Is there some stuff that we do not see? Maybe give us a little bit of a quick lowdown on the different types of mold.
So it can be both. It doesn't have to be, you can have mold in your home without seeing like, a big black, spots or white in your case. So it can be invisible. And when I'm testing people, there's lots of different molds that people can be exposed to. And I think it's really important to just highlight the difference in definition of words. We can have mold exposure, but what can really make people sick is the mycotoxins, which are the toxins that the mold produce. And so when we have, and mycotoxins, they're not alive. We don't kill mycotoxins. They're a toxic compound that we can be exposed to, that we can have in our bodies, and we can support detoxification to get it out. But that's really what can cause problematic symptoms in people are those mycotoxins.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. I recently, actually over a year ago, did a test and I had heavy metals and mold exposure. And I'm totally worked on my detoxification. I have to do another test, but I didn't feel anything, but the test did say it was a blood test, I think, because I did a bunch of tests now. I don't remember which one was which, but I know, and my coach was like, "Are you drinking a lot of coffee?" And I said, "I love
Mhm.
coffee." So I
Yeah.
switched to a brand called Purity, and they have mold free coffee. So coffee, I guess, is one of those things where mold can grow. Or the mycotoxins, I love that you clarified that difference. So the mycotoxins are the things that really cause the problems, but we really don't see them, right? Like we it's not like the black stuff growing on the walls, like you said.
Right. And we can have, to your point, we can have food-based mycotoxins and we can have mycotoxins that are more in our environment. So when we test, we can see kind of which ones are showing up on our tests, and kind of decide looking at the types and looking at the levels, how high they are, is it more likely that this is coming from our food or is it more likely that this is coming from our environment?
Okay, so what kind of tests are you doing with people? I'm just curious. I want to really talk about the symptoms and vision too.
Yeah, I use a lot of tests through Vibrant and I usually do their total tox, which includes mycotoxins and
That's the
heavy
one I did.
metals.
That's
Yes.
the one I did. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a urine test. Yeah.
Oh, that was the urine test. Okay, because
Yeah.
I did several at the same time, and I just know it was vibrant. So, okay, yeah. So that was okay. So, what are some symptoms in terms of vision? Because a lot of times we talk about blurry vision, but blurry vision can be fatigue, it could be hormones, it could be dry eyes, and obviously our topic today is dry eyes. So we already know that that is a huge symptom. But tell us a little bit about or maybe tell us about how these mycotoxins or this mold exposure causes dry eyes and other symptoms that people might experience.
Yeah, so with the dry eye, the mycotoxins can irritate the optic nerve, cranial nerves, and that can contribute to the experience of feeling and having dry eyes. It can also activate your immune system and create kind of a systemic inflammation and dysregulation, hyperactivity of your immune system. which can contribute to the dry eye. And also when we have heavy toxic burden, whether it's mycotoxins or other type of toxins or toxicants in our environment, it can also downregulate the effectiveness of our mitochondria, which is where our cellular energy is made. And so, if our mitochondria are stuck in something we call the cell danger response, we all learned in like ninth grade biology that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell, right? But when they're stuck in healing mode, when they're really in battleship mode instead of powerhouse mode, when they're stuck in something called the cell danger response, and that can happen when we have heavy toxic burden, when we don't feel safe, when we have nervous system dysregulation, and so if our mitochondria are more in battleship mode instead of powerhouse mode, then that can contribute to dry eye as well, because it can interfere with the mucous membranes and the tissues in the eye. Other eye-related symptoms that can come with mycotoxin. Um, Blurry vision, as you mentioned, is a big one. Failing the VCS test, which we can talk about, having a lot more light sensitivity or like an ice pick type of headache around your eyes. A big one that I had a lot is ocular migraines. And in case somebody doesn't know, that's that type of migraine where you have kind of this white and black zigzag. It's usually kind of rounded. It's usually kind of in the corner of your vision that can come and go. And also you can feel more pressure, sensitivity, and pain around your eyes. Some of that might have to do with sometimes people can have colonization of mycotoxins in their sinuses, and so sometimes that can contribute to pressure around their eyes.
Wow, you know what you described, ocular migraines. I remember the first time I had this. I was like, and I was thinking of, the Jungle Book, the snake car, okay, or whatever we called it.
Yes.
But it was like wow, wow. And I
Yes.
remember I was skiing, that was a long time ago in Switzerland. I know the snow was really wet and it was really hard and we skied. And I remember sitting down at this, little hut on the mountain for lunch. And I remember I was sitting down and that happened. I was like, I thought it was just pure exhaustion from like that effort because it was super hardcore cardio exercise to ski in that snow. So interesting. I think a lot of times, like me back then, before I mean, I worked on my vision since I was like a teenager, but I didn't really know about a lot of these health things back then, right? And so I think a lot of times we don't really put two and two together. And like you said, the doctors don't even know this. They don't even look at those
No.
things like as mold exposure. So we talked about, just to recap, right? So it was blurry vision, generally speaking. Things look more blurry or fuzzy.
Mhm.
Those ocular migraines that look like that zigzag on the side of the eyes. We talked about dry eyes. So the mucus layer, last week I had a whole episode on dry eyes myself, and I talked about the three layers on the cornea. So we have the lipid layer, we have the aqueous layer, and then we have the mucus layer. So that's affecting it. And I love how you said the mitochondria, which, by the way, the retinal cells need more energy than any other cell in the body. So
Yes.
if the mitochondria are not in powerhouse, but in battleship mode, it's like, and then that inflammation, that's why we also probably have so many retinal diseases, like any kind of inflammatory diseases in the retina, like macular degeneration, macular pucca, macular edema, all of those things, retinal detachment. And then obviously the other inflammatory things like blepharitis on the eyelid,
Mhm.
conjunctivitis, like all the IS endings, right? Those are all inflammatory responses. So from what I'm hearing, because of it triggers inflammation, it could basically be, maybe even styes or some other things. And some things are viral or bacterial. Is that also a factor or not so much? It's more the systemic inflammation that would cause eye problems versus like, something like that's a stye or pink eye that's more viral or bacterial.
Yeah, more so the things causing systemic
Okay.
inflammation. Hmm.
Okay. So, all right. So this is super fascinating. Somebody was asking about what that test was called. It was Vibrant Total Tox, right?
Yeah, the total tox does mycotoxins, heavy metals, and environmental toxicants. You can just order the mycotoxins, but it's just a better deal when you bundle. So I just
Right.
usually order it all.
That makes total sense. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about this VCS test that you talked about. So what is that test and how maybe describe that a little bit. I know you don't have a picture of it, but what does it do and how do you know you failed it?
So it's a test that you can take online, VCStest.com, and it's a visual contrast sensitivity test. That's what VCS stands for. And so essentially what you're going to be doing is it's going to be showing, it's going to be giving you images, gray, black and white and grayscale images, and it's going to be asking you if you can see and if you can visualize the contrast that's in those images. And so when we have issues with mycotoxins or when we're struggling with Lyme and co-infections, or when we have some sort of biotoxin illness, a lot of chronic illnesses, whether it's related to mycotoxin exposure or not, a lot of these people will fail the VCS test. They lose their ability to pick up on this low-level contrast in these images. And I remember I took this test while I was at work working in this sick building that I told you about, and I failed it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is real. This is not in my head. Like the doctors told me like something is up here." And so it is not a diagnostic test, but it can give you some additional information that there is something going on that is interfering with your vision on a more systemic level.
All right, and I see I posted that website link into the live chat as well. So I think you have to register to perform this test. I've never actually done this, but it means visual contrast sensitivity. And like you said, the contrast, as the contrast gets lower, and you talked about images, but as you were speaking, obviously one big problem that a lot of people have is that their reading ability when it comes to like books, right? It comes to books.
Yes.
And in bright sunlight, when the text looks really black and white, it's easy to read. But now you look in dimmer light or indoor light, and it's less contrasty. So is that also, that would probably make sense too, because you have lower sensitivity. It's almost like the lines are more blurry, versus like they're really sharp. So that's also lower contrast basically means you have more trouble seeing.
Yes, and when you take the test, it'll show you the image. And when I say image, it's not a picture, it's like lines, black and white
Exactly, that's what I
lines.
thought. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then it'll show you like potential answers, like what direction are the white lines going, and you have to choose. And it's absolutely fascinating. If nothing else, it's very interesting.
Okay, but you clearly notice that you failed this. So we
Yeah.
obviously, when we talk about vision, we always talk about, aging, presbyopia, losing your near vision, and I'm helping people improve their near vision. But we also cannot pretend that we don't age. I always say this, right? We get more wrinkles, things are
Mhm.
changing, but it doesn't mean we can't do something about it. So you did this test. Obviously, you're definitely a lot younger. So you did this test back then, you were able to be pregnant afterwards. So you did this test, you clearly knew it wasn't like aging eyes or the ability to focus up close. It was literally something else that caused you to not have this contrast ability or not pass these tests, right?
Yeah, and that's why so many things other than mycotoxin exposure can cause you to fail this test because it's anything that's driving neuroinflammation. If there's a lot of neuroinflammation happening, then it's more likely that you will fail this test. And so it's a good tool that's very accessible that you can do. It's not diagnostic, but it can give a signal if
Right.
we need to dig deeper.
So I'm wondering who gave you this test back then? Like, how did you figure this out? Because you said your doctors sent you from one to the other and did all these other tests for all these other crazy diseases. So you
Yeah.
must have been really concerned. So how did you get access to this test?
I was just doing a lot of Googling. I was in my young 20s. Like I knew I knew nothing. I was
Yeah,
just
right.
doing a lot of Googling, so I wasn't getting any answers, but I had all of these vision issues. I was
Mm.
feeling vertigo all the time. I was super blurry. The ocular migraines, it just kept coming and I was like, what is going on with my eyes? Like something is happening. And I was just Googling and happened to come up in a search and I was like, okay, I guess I'll do this. And then I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Okay. And it was the first time because the up until that point, the only messages I was getting from my providers was that you're fine, it's all in your head.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's a
it was
favorite.
in my head, it just wasn't made up, but it was the first time I had some evidence, and I just really glommed onto that because I knew I wasn't making this up.
So Dr. Google is not always that bad when it comes to just doing some. No, I'm just joking, and now it's Dr. AI. But
Yeah.
doing some research, at least kind of finding, like I always talk about, we have to be Sherlock Holmes with our health and just be really curious, connect the dots, and be mindful and notice these things. So you had severe vision issues, which were like, not something where you're like, oh, I'm just feeling a little bit tired, but it was really so dramatic that you realized something was going on, right? So you were very clear. So tell us what we can do, because I want to kind of also switch over. So this trust is something everybody can do. It's free. However, you have to, it's not a diagnostic test. I know that ophthalmologists, I'm not an ophthalmologist, obviously, but I know that ophthalmologists might also be able to see that in a retinal exam. So that's always why I'm saying get your eyes checked for health. So go to an ophthalmologist, get your eyes checked also just from like not to leave with a prescription. That's what I'm helping everybody get out of. But just to know that your eyes are healthy, and they might actually see that in your, if that inflammation is happening, that can also be found in an eye exam, by the way. So I just want everybody to know that might be also your best bet if you, obviously, in addition to doing the toxic test, the toxin test, and all those kind of things. But working with a provider like you or somebody who can help you make sense of all this stuff, right? So tell us what we can do. What are the things people can do?
So I am a big fan of testing because the thing is every mycotoxin and other toxins as well, like I mentioned, I run that total tox panel so I can see more of what's happening. They all have different mechanisms of action on the body and how they impact the body. And so therefore, the protocol is going to change. And so I'm a big fan of just testing and having those answers. But in addition to testing your body, it's also a good idea to test your environment. And so doing an ERMI test, ERMI, in your home that can help you accurately test what you may be exposed to in your home, even if you don't see anything. So if you've ever had water damage in your home, even if it's not, maybe not currently wet, you can do an ERMI test to help you figure out what you're exposed to in your environment. So I like to start with testing. I like to know and just ask the right questions so we get the right answers and we can just fix it and move on and not waste time guessing. From there, the um, back to the nervous system piece. And
Can I
so
ask something really quick?
yeah,
For the test, I just Googled it as you were talking. Is there a specific test that you recommend? Because I've seen so many different mold companies, and I
yeah.
just, and then that person says that's the wrong way to do it, and then I'm always like, well, I haven't done it because I is there one that you feel is that you recommend to get for the environment?
So in my practice, I use the company EnviroBiomics.
Uh-huh.
And they have several different tests. I do the ERMI. So they have a test that's the number 4 test that also tests gram-negative bacteria in your environment. And gram-negative bacteria can cause a lot of similar symptoms as mold and mycotoxins, but it's a lot easier to remediate. So I like to test both because if it comes back that it's more a bacteria issue than a mycotoxin issue, perfect. We can deal with it even easier.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I like to do the number 4.
Okay, so I put that in the number. I put that in the YouTube live chat just in case somebody is wondering, because that's not in the show notes, but we can definitely add it to the show notes, because then I will actually do that too, because now I'm really curious. I feel like it's so much more useful to be productive. But let's go back to the nervous system, because I just wanted to clear up the test stuff, because people are always like, where's the link? Which one should I do? And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
okay.
So from there, then we really focus on the nervous systems. And so this is where I think a lot of people get it wrong. They want to jump to a detoxification protocol or a parasite cleanse or whatever it is that they're seeing online that they're getting it, fed through the algorithm around detoxification. But what can happen is number one, your body may not be prepared. Your emunctory, your drainage pathways may not be prepared and ready for that, so you can do more harm than good. But even a step before opening up your drainage pathways is your nervous system and making sure that your body feels safe. Because
Mhm.
again, this is why it's actually really funny. I was just talking to my team and we were looking at all of our past clients, and we realized that over 90% of them we were not their first functional medicine practitioner that they came to. And where I was like, God, that sucks. Like, just as an industry as a whole, like, why can't we get it right the first time? And so I was like, well, why is that? What is happening? And I really feel that this is a big piece, is trying to skip over this nervous system piece. Because if, like I said, if those cells, if those mitochondria are stuck in the cell danger response, it doesn't matter how much detoxing we do over here, we're not going to get out of that loop. And we're not going to close that loop on that cell danger response and get back to a state where we can switch back into powerhouse mode. And so that's really important. And it's also important while we're in this nervous system piece. So we do the testing, we focus on nervous system, and then we also focus on optimizing your terrain. And this is really, really important. This is another thing that I think a lot of really well-meaning practitioners can get wrong sometimes, is that let's say, for example, candida. That's a very common thing that a lot of functional practitioners look for and treat for. We can have candida. It's a yeast that can overgrow in our gut, in our mouth. And so somebody does a test, they're high on candida, and then they go on anti-candida supplements and an anti-candida diet, and they're going to kill the candida because that's the root cause of their problems. But my question is, well, why is the candida there in the first place? What is it about the terrain? What is it about the environment that made the candida go, hey, this is a pretty good spot to set up shop. Let's do that. And that's where I like to start. And so really sending messages of safety to the nervous system and also to the subconscious mind, which is a whole nother conversation, but then getting into terrain optimization and just really making sure that we're looking upstream and we're creating an environment that is not hospitable to these things to overgrow. And then after that, we get to like detoxification, drainage, addressing pathogens, underlying infections. So I think that that's really important because that's actually like pretty downstream. And if you try to jump there first, we don't end up with lasting results and it can make you feel worse.
This is you're speaking from my heart, because when it comes with vision improvement, people always want these eye exercises. And I'm not talking about neurological specific exercises like you talked about vertigo or something. I'm talking about like teach me something to see sharp. I want these exercises.
Mhm.
And pretty much everybody that comes to me is like super stressed. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe to see. The nervous system is not in functional mode. And I like how you call it the mitochondria and the cell danger response. So we need to work on all these things. And I always talk about setting up your environment. So I always give one quick example. Like in my case, people talk about, eye doctors talk about the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look up for your computer for 20 seconds, look 20 feet in the distance. I'm like, that sounds so catchy, but who is going to do that? No one. So set up your environment where first of all, your room is well lit. You are, put your computer in front of a window so that you
Yeah.
can easily, like, I can just literally look far while we're talking without like getting up and turning around and setting a timer. So, right, it's like you want to make sure that you have your environment helping you with your vision. And so I love what you're saying about this, because and also another thing that I always found, and I'm wondering if you have the same. So somebody that struggles with presbyopia, like reading, teach me how to improve my presbyopia. I'm like, if you can't figure out what habits or what things are not working for you in the distance or the middle distance, you're not going to be able to figure it out here where you have your worst vision on myopia, people that can't see far. They always want to see like 3 blocks down. Like, I'm like, no, you have to improve your clarity from here to here to here to here. And that's
Yeah.
how you improve. So I love that you said this, because I feel like we can't jump into the deep end. We have to learn to swim and be, like as a
Yes.
metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just like, I think this is why so many people see so many practitioners because things were not done in the right order and their body wasn't ready. And I am just wherever and whenever I can, talk about like doing things a different way, I think it's so important because if somebody's going to make the jump from like a conventional medicine doctor to a functional medicine provider, I don't want them to then have to do another provider and another one and another one. Let's just like get it right the first time. That's my goal.
Yeah. So do you have any specific things that you're teaching that you want to share with us today that you would be, so you talked about nervous system regulation, then optimizing your terrain. I love that terrain. It sounds like we're living in the animal kingdom, I guess. But I like really having everything set up in a way to support you. I talk about a lot of like orange light, like get rid of all these overhead LED lights,
Mhm.
don't turn them on for vision in the evening so that your circadian clock can set and all those things. So what are you specifically doing? Can you give us some examples of what they can do and or what you help people do with nervous system regulation and also the terrain? And then lastly, I do want to talk about the mindset shift because that's also huge in what I do. So I'm curious.
Yeah, so you really hit the nail on the head. The number one thing we can do is sync up our circadian biology. And a lot of that has to do with type, timing, and position of light. And so, you really mentioned talking about type if we're exposed to a lot of blue lights, and then you also mentioned timing, like if we're exposed to that after the sun goes down, we can do things to mitigate that. If we're outside during the sunrise, that's a time where we have the highest percentage of infrared light at that time. The infrared light, we have photoreceptors, as you know, in our eyes, we have photoreceptors on our skin, and that infrared light can provide voltage to our mitochondria that we talked about, that to help keep them in powerhouse mode. And so it can also, while we're doing that, it can also increase the amount of water that our mitochondria make. A lot of people like to talk about how mitochondria make ATP and it's the energy of the cell, and that's all great and fine and dandy, but people don't like to talk about the water that's made in our mitochondria. And
Mhm.
that water is very, very special. It's called exclusion zone water, and it's called exclusion zone because it increases our resilience. It keeps things like mycotoxins, viruses, bacteria, fungi, yeast, parasites, keeps them at bay. It excludes them from our cells, so it increases our resilience. And I love a good habit stack. And so, thinking about getting outside in the morning, getting that good infrared light without glasses or contacts on if it's safe for you to do so. Also, side tip, if you feel comfortable or if it's appropriate for you to do so, like exposing your stomach while you're doing this can be really helpful because we have photoreceptors over our digestive tract that can help activate digestion and that migrating motor complex that moves our food through our digestive tract. So it's really helpful for constipation, but that's not the topic of our show. But just if you're going to do this, I love a habit stack, and so we might as well get the most out of it. You could also focus on your breath out there. You can focus, you could go out barefoot. We can get lovely electrons. Electrons give us energy. We can get those from the earth. The earth is an amazing energy donor. It supports us. So we can go out there barefoot. We can practice gratitude. And this whole process can take 5 minutes. You can do it for longer, but it can take 5 minutes and it will have a net positive effect on your physiology. And so, talk about something that is accessible and easy and doesn't take any time and is free. It's one of the biggest things we can do for our health. And then the last thing is position of light. And so, everything's on a spectrum. We do the best we can, and perfection doesn't exist. It's a myth. But position of light. So if we're inside and we have a bunch of overhead lights on, but the sun is not overhead outside, then that's a circadian mismatch. So if possible, if the sun is not overhead, turn your overhead lights off, use more peripheral lighting like lamps, so that we're syncing up position of lighting as well. So position, timing, and type of light are really, really helpful.
First of all, beautifully said. And we had an eye doctor actually talk about the exclusion zone water. So thank you for reminding us of
Yeah.
that because it's so important. And light is actually a way to improve the exclusion zone water. So it's very like you said, light is therapy. Eyes are light receivers. And we definitely get this message that eyes have to be protected from light at all given times. So yeah, there is always times where sunglasses are helpful for sure. but most people are like getting not enough light into their eyes than too much, I would say. Maybe the gardeners and the people outside, that's different, but for most of us, spending time indoors. So thank you for clarifying that again and highlighting the importance of the, like I call this clear morning ritual, but like the grounding, the breath, getting the morning natural light, maybe ideally even onto your stomach, but into your eyes. It's so simple, the things that we can do. We don't have to spend a lot of money on biohacking devices and all these things. So I absolutely love that. So let's talk about, like, we have a few more minutes left. Let's finish this up with mindset, because this is like also an overused word, but I couldn't agree more. Tony Robbins said 80% of success is mindset related, and I 100% know that with myself and also with my clients, that that's often the biggest reason they don't see the improvements they want. So talk a little bit about, from your perspective, about how you address mindset and what you found to be helpful with vision conditions or health conditions or any kind of, in your particular field, mycotoxin exposure, if that's in any way different than what I teach.
Yeah, so mindset and emotional health is so key. And it took me a while to really get this. And once I started really incorporating this work into my practice, it was like all of a sudden my clients were getting better, faster, easier results. And I was like, okay, this is another reason I feel like how I was talking about earlier, where people are jumping from practitioner to practitioner, if we're also skipping over this mindset piece, if we're so hyper focused on what we're trying to do on what I call the physical plane,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. But if we think about the mindset piece and the power of our subconscious and our unconscious mind, really that is the 95% that is running the show. It's our beliefs, it's our attitudes, it's our programming that's been installed. A lot of our programming, a lot of our beliefs we've picked up aren't even our own. We've picked them up from family members or from past generations, from the media, and a lot of it is from until about the age of about 7 years old. And so we can think about this like in your audience, think about how many people you've maybe come in contact with that say like, "Oh, all the women in my family have bad eyes or bad vision, or they all get cataracts or whatever it is." And so they have that limiting belief. They're accepting that limiting belief, and they don't have to. And so that's programming that they have accepted. And so thinking about what limiting beliefs, limiting decisions, what negative emotions do we have that haven't been processed through our body? What anger, fear, sadness, hurt, shame, guilt do we have that's holding us back on a subconscious level? Because the subconscious is that 95%. The conscious is the 5%. And so if somebody has a health goal, they want to have better vision or they want to feel better or have more energy or lose weight or whatever it is, if they have a health goal, that 5%, that conscious mind, that is the goal setter. You can consciously say, I want to achieve XYZ goal. But the 95% underneath, that is the goal getter. And so if we have limiting beliefs that are holding us back, or negative emotions that are holding us back, or a scarcity mindset, or we're using language that is sending messages on a constant daily basis to our subconscious, anchoring in exactly what we don't want, well, then we're not going to get the results we want in the physical plane. It's another reason people can kind of stay stuck on that hamster wheel. And so, mindset work, really diving into, what that is so, so important. And the number one tip I can give people just to kind of get started and thinking about this is to start to get very curious and aware of your language you're using throughout the day. Think about even when someone says, "Hey, how you doing?" What's your knee-jerk response? Is it, "Oh, hanging in there," or doing all right? It's like, well, then you're just going to keep hanging in there, if that's what you keep saying. Or if somebody says, "Oh man, this project is killing me." Well, then that's the results you're going to keep giving if that's the language we keep using. And so that's the first thing, is to just get really curious and aware of the language that we use throughout the day.
Thank you. That is so powerful. And that, we all do this, right? I've caught
Yeah.
myself the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds. And with my audience, there's a lot of times I'm blind without my glasses, or there's a lot of
Yes.
things that we say, and a lot of it is also colloquialism, or we always say these things, It's so I 100% agree, catching yourself, like the thoughts and the loud words that you say. And we all have this, right? We all have this. I'm like, none of us is perfect. We still, you did a beautiful meditation and retreat I attended. So that was so powerful that you did that morning meditation that you did for us. So I think it's really important that whatever we use, if it's free tools or working with somebody, but I love how you said the goal getter and the goal setter, because 95% is really about working with our beliefs and our mindset and our emotional levels. And that is the harder stuff, but
Yeah.
that's how we really transform it. So thank you so much for, like, I love how you have all these catchy titles for these things, because it's easy to remember, but it's easy to remember that way.
Yeah.
So maybe we can all do today, can we catch ourselves using a word? Like I used to say a lot, I'm so confused. That was
Mm.
like my way of, like, basically as a recovering perfectionist. So back then, I grew up in a German family. I mean, Germans are the masters of perfection. And, you know, uh, there was always this idea, like if I wasn't performing or understanding something right, instead of saying, I have a question, I would be like, I'm so confused. That was kind of giving me this, like, you didn't do a great job of explaining this. I was playing the victim, like, versus saying, I have a question, and being proactive in terms of making sure. So, so that's a lot that we all do this to a certain degree somewhere in our lives, right? So I think nobody's going to be like, oh, I have figured it all out. I never
Yeah.
do that, right? And you, like you said, especially with people that we know well or that know us well, they also can push our buttons really well. So thank you so much. This was incredibly insightful. So to close off, first of all, I would love to tell us where people can find you, and also you have a quiz, right? You have a mold quiz. I will put that into the chat so that everybody has that. And tell us where people can find you.
So my Instagram is resilientmotherhood.health. That's where I'm more active. And that's also my website, resilientmotherhood.health. So easy to remember. And then, yes, so the mold quiz, you can go through and score yourself and see and compare your symptoms and your score to give you another data point on maybe if this is something that warrants a deeper look.
Awesome. And then any last final parting words or tips that you have for the audience while we are live here?
If you feel like you have been one of those people who've maybe like been seeking answers for a long time, or maybe you have worked with a practitioner, you've invested and it's just not working, you're jumping. Um, just because you haven't found answers doesn't mean that there are not answers. You don't have to settle. And every experience where maybe in your head you might have labeled it as a failure is really such a learning and a gift. And so just know that the answers are there. And, finding the right people to help you uncover those answers or just continuing to show up is so important because you don't have to settle for a life that you don't love. You don't. You get to have a life that you love, even if you've worked with other practitioners, even if people have told you, doctors have told you your labs look fine, even if you've been told it's just part of getting older, even if you've been told it's just part of being a mom, whatever BS thing you've been told, you don't have to accept that and settle.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much. That's it, YouTube. We see you next week. And then my Clear Vision Club community, and we will have a little bit of extra time with Dr. Brandy. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was incredibly insightful. People are posting. This was great. So yes, I fully agree. We all learned a lot. Thank you.